Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is Billy Brandt. On this week's show, we'll talk a few headlines, and then we're going to dive into a recap of the Ultimate Fighter 21 finale, UFC 189, and we're also going to pick the main card for UFC this weekend. No, UFC Wednesday. Boy, get my days mixed up here. UFC San Diego on Wednesday. And don't mind the fly that's flying around on my video here as we welcome in Big Shot Bill here to the show. And how's it going today, Billy?
There's no bad day when the hype is real.
Yes, indeed. We're going to get to that in just a minute here, but a lot of fights coming up. So we're doing a split show. As obviously you noticed, it's today's Monday. We will not be going on our usual day, Wednesday. But we will be back this week on Thursday, and that's to break down the card we're picking today, UFC Fight Night San Diego. And we're also going to preview UFC Glasgow, which will be this weekend on the UFC Fight Pass. That's Bisbing against Talas Leites, the main event, and that one, the UFC's first trip into the country of Scotland. And let's get to the real big headline here this weekend, Billy, and that would be the fact that they named the Ultimate Fighter coaches for season 22. One of them will be a guy who's coached before and a former WEC champion, that being Uriah Faber. And the other is the newly minted UFC interim featherweight champion in Conor McGregor. I get the McGregor thing. I really do. It kind of makes sense to have that hype go on a 12-week episode TV show. It really does. It makes sense. What doesn't make sense is that he's coaching a guy and the hype that he can build to a fight is going against someone he's not going to fight against in Uriah Faber. And that to me is kind of the disservice to this thing. And I get maybe not having Jose Aldo coaching him. He doesn't really speak English well. But at the end of the day, it should be Aldo. And that kind of supplements doing another huge world tour again. And if something goes wrong, you still built up TV ratings because of Conor McGregor's antics on The Ultimate Fighter. And, you know, at that point, you can still throw in other people if Aldo got hurt or something. But I just think that that makes more sense. And if people didn't know Jose Aldo before, they can start to maybe get a chance to know him, even if it's through subtitles.
Yeah, I don't really, I don't get this. I mean, I agree 100% with what you're saying. Like, who's not going to want to watch Conor on that show all the time? It's going to be gold the whole time. But against Faber, it's almost sort of pointless to go through all this build-up. I seen like they got in a little scuffle for the Mendez fight, so they already kind of have this history now. And there'll be a build-up, but for nothing. They panned it like a Europe versus USA. I would almost rather them try to do like a Europe versus Brazil or something like that and just run Aldo.
Yeah, I mean, I get the concept of, you know, USA versus Europe, kind of like a Ryder Cup sort of deal, I guess. But if you're going to pick someone he's not going to fight, pick someone not close to his weight class. You know, pick a heavyweight or something, you know, or pick, pick a welterweight. I don't know, someone you know for a fact he's not going to fight. Or heck, even just pick someone who's not even fighting anymore. I don't know, pick Forrest Griffin or Chuck Liddell or something. You know, I don't know.
Someone just fun to watch.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're really going for. Because they're like, you know, we can just throw Conor in anything, and it's going to blow up. So,
yeah, I don't know. And Uriah Faber's already coached the show. I'm kind of surprised that he agreed to do it, to be quite honest, especially with not kind of that payoff at the end.
I almost think that they think it could have been like if Mendez lost, this would have been the fight they would have. I mean, if Mendez won, this would have been the fight they made, you know? But since Conor won, he won't fight Uriah.
Right, because obviously Uriah would most definitely fight Conor McGregor.
Yeah. So if Mendez won, maybe they would have booked that fight. And then since he didn't, they're just going to do it anyway, run the show. But Conor goes on to Aldo.
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing will be where they're going to place his fight against Aldo, whether they're going to wait kind of till like the New Year's Eve show or if they're going to try to capitalize quickly and run it maybe in October or, you know, early or November.
Yeah. The earlier the better, I hope. But I think Connor's got some knee injuries. I don't know if maybe that's why they're even doing this, to let him kind of have some time off. Maybe we'll get it early next year, I think. I'm not getting my hopes up for nothing too soon.
Well, I mean, if they could put that on the New Year's Eve card,
Yeah,
my thinking, I'm assuming Rousey's gonna get the win here in a couple weeks, and then you can put Rousey versus the Jessica Misha Tate winner with Connor versus Aldo, and you could get over 1.5 million pay-per-view buys on New Year's Eve.
for
That's what
sure.
I would do if I was the UFC.
I don't know what this card did, but it had to be close. And if you put those together, there's going to be no card close.
I just think it's a no-brainer to have that happen.
Yeah. I
And
want to see the
everything to
numbers
me
on this
lines up
card.
to doing that.
Yeah, I don't know if they want to like put it all in one card because they're kind of now struggling throughout selling their other cards, but who knows? UFC 200's coming up now. They announced that, so they got to start putting out some super cards.
Well, the New Year's Eve card's usually a pretty stacked card. So it
Yeah,
wouldn't be that something they've never done before, having 2 title fights on that. And to
I
me,
get
that
two
would be the
title
next big
fights.
one to do it on.
That's just like their two biggest draws, you know? Like Ronda and Conor are it right now, really, that are actually selling pay-per-views really well.
Well, Ronda, I think, is most definitely going to be on the New Year's Eve card. I mean,
Yeah.
she's fighting August 1st. That's basically 4 months after her fight against Cahill. And the way she takes care of business, she's going to be ready to go. So I can't imagine that being an issue. But like you said, possibly, who knows how long Mr. Aldo and his ribs that are hurt or aren't hurt are going to be an
That's what
issue.
I'm
And then,
worried
like you
about.
said, Connor, this is the second time he's had an issue with his knee. He had an slight ACL tear while he fought Max Holloway
Yeah,
a couple years ago. So, and he was out for a good amount of time. So, obviously, it's definitely something that he's going to be careful with because he doesn't want to do that again.
100%. And that's what I'm worried about. And I don't want to get my hopes up for anything too soon because I have a feeling we're going to be waiting a while for that one.
All right, let's start first. Even though it happened on Sunday, it was the less bigger event, and that's the Ultimate Fighter 21 finale, which was Sunday night to cap off International Fight Week there in Las Vegas. Had 6 fights on the main card. Now, originally, we thought Gerard Sanders against Russell Doane was going to be the kickoff fight in the bantamweight division, but they kind of switched it around on us and ended up putting Maximo Blanco against Mike De La Torre in the featherweight division. So with that real quick change, Billy and I hadn't really known a lot about De La Torre, so we just kind of picked Blanco by default, just in case people were wondering, because we had to do our picks on the fly because we did our show Wednesday afternoon. They didn't announce the final lineup until late Wednesday evening, so we updated our picks Thursday morning on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast, if you didn't check them out. But had to change them very late on Saturday night. I just double checked everything. But looking at this one, Blanco hit him with a straight right. You see De La Torre kind of roll around, and it looked like he was going to throw a couple more. And then all of a sudden, Evil Levine steps in. I think a tad quick. After the fight, De La Torre did seem kind of out of it when they got him back up, but I would have liked to seen a couple more thrown to make sure, because there could have been a situation where in that kind of scramble, he grabs onto his legs and kind of maybe takes him down or at least avoids big damage. I just think that whole sequence kind of happened real quickly, and this is another mark on Yves Levine's record there.
Yeah, I agree. It happened pretty fast, but that's his call, and that's just the sport, so there's not much you can do there.
So unfortunately for De La Torre, he loses this fight, and Blanco gets the win. And I believe, didn't Blanco miss weight
Was it
for
him?
this event? I'm
No,
almost
100% sure.
okay. Well, I think he has missed weight before, so that's something to keep an eye out with him moving forward. And then the interesting thing is he knocks out De La Torre, and Blanco is now calling out Conor McGregor.
Of course. Of course.
I'm not going to be wrong. Blanco, you're a promising guy here in this division. No one can take that away from you, but you beat a guy no one's ever heard of, and you're not even close to the top 15. Like you're not close to really taking on anyone yet.
It was a waste of a good call out. There's like 5 people in line in case anything happens for Conor. He might as well have called out somewhere reasonable in the top 10 and maybe got a big fight.
Maybe should have called out Jeremy Stevens. That might have worked.
Hey, there you go. I think did they say they're going to redo that fight though, or they offered a rematch
For Blanco and De La Torre?
No, for Stevens fight
Against Bermudez?
Yeah, I could be way wrong.
I mean,
But I think they said they might run it back.
I wouldn't be down opposed to that.
No way, that fight's too good. That's
The
kind of
next,
off topic right now, though.
oh right, no, for sure. We'll get to the Stevens Bermudez fight here in a minute, but the next fight in the evening, Michelle Waterson against Angela Magana. Waterson making her UFC debut, formerly of Invicta, the former Invicta atomweight champion at 105, moving up 10 pounds to realize her dream of fighting in the UFC. And Magana may not be the strongest in this division, Billy, but I definitely think that she's a solid 115. And for Waterson moving up 10 pounds, it didn't seem like strength or being pressured by a bigger girl was a problem. In fact, Waterson looked just as strong at 115 to me as she did 105. I mean, she slammed Magana and picked her up with ease several times in this fight. And I think outside the first round, which you can make a case for Magana winning, this fight was all Michelle Waterson. After a early takedown by Magana and some pressure there with an armbar, Waterson was able to answer with 3 takedowns of her own and really just started not only doing work in the stand-up, but at that point really just took Magana out of the game. I don't know if she was tired or really went too hard for that armbar and gassed out, but overall, how do you like outstriking your opponent 102-19 en route to a 3rd round submission victory for the karate hottie Michelle Waterson? Very impressive in her debut, and I'm really looking forward to her UFC tenure.
Yeah, she looked good. It was a shaky start, but I mean, she moved up a weight class. She went to the UFC. I can see that, and she shook it off. She dominated the next 2 rounds and got the finish. And what I look for most in this fight was, like you said, if it would be a problem going against like the bigger opponents or stuff like that. But she seemed to handle it well. She looked strong, so she can go far.
Now, of course, she beat former title challenger here, Jessica Penne, back in Invicta. That's when she became the Invicta champion, her submitting Jessica Penne. And now that she's back in the UFC, there's already been talk between the two. So even though Penne lost, it's obviously coming off a title fight. Do you think we get Waterson Penne 2 for those next 2 ladies in their UFC tenure?
Yeah, 100%. I'd like to see that fight again.
I think that's kind of a no-brainer because if Penne wins, that keeps her right back, in the standing, and if Waterson wins, that shoots her up the rankings, and that puts her maybe only 1 fight away from fighting for the title.
Yeah, for sure. If they fight again, and I mean, I know Penny's coming off a loss, but it is the title fight. If she beats her, definitely 1 fight away, especially in this weight class.
No, that was a really close fight. If you got Fight Pass, go back and then watch. I believe it was Invicta 4 or 5. Incredible fight. And Waterson at the time was not that highly regarded. She kind of came out of nowhere and was able to submit Jessica Penne, who now was a more known name, but obviously the champion at the time. And, here comes this girl known as the Karate Hottie and was able to submit Jessica Penne. So definitely that's one. Go back and look because I don't know how often you'll get to see the highlights, but yeah, definitely like to see that one run back. The next fight of the evening was in the welterweight division as Jorge Masvidal moved up to fight former Ultimate Fighter Brazil winner Cesar Ferreira, who's moving down from middleweight. And boy, I got this one way wrong. It's the one I got wrong. And I thought that Masvidal moving up 15 pounds, in which he missed weight on his first attempt. I could not believe that. He made it on the second attempt, but the dude's moving up 15 pounds and he missed weight.
Come on, Rumble Johnson.
Yeah, that was interesting. So once he got over that, got in the cage. I mean, he looked the same. I mean, he didn't look maybe a tad fast. I don't know. It looks like Ferreira handled the weight cut well. We were definitely kind of worried about that. him moving down the 15. He seemed all right, but I don't know if Masvidal's putting more power on his shots or he just caught him, right on the button there with that good combination there towards the end of the first, and then followed up with some elbows, and Fajeda was out. So if he can not miss weight, Masvidal, we already know he's a really tough guy. He has a lot of experience fighting on top guys at 155. Fajeda didn't really go for too many takedowns. I think officially, if I can look it up here, he tried 3. He was successful on 1. He may get pressured against some more guys here in this division, but at least so far, Masvidal looks to have made the right move moving up to 15 pounds.
Yeah, I thought he looked really good, man. I mean, despite the weight cut or whatever, I don't know about that, but he looked strong. That elbow he landed, the short elbow to drop him, was really nice against that little clinch, I think it was, when he was against the cage. And then he finished up with great ground and pound. But he looked strong the whole fight because Fajeda looked really big, but they handled it well. This fight was so interesting going in because of the opposite, one moving up, one moving down. I don't know how it played out, and pretty wrong there.
Yeah, definitely did not call that one right, but that's why they fight it out in the cage. The next fight was some of the Ultimate Fighter guys, as Michael Graves from American Top Team took on Vicente Luque from the Black Zillions, and this was surprising to me by the fact that not only did Graves go for the takedown, go for it often, but was very successful. In fact, he was 7 of 10 on his takedowns in this fight. And that was pretty much the story of this fight, as Graves was really able to dominate with 3 takedowns apiece in rounds 1 and 2. And in round 3, I think maybe he got a tad tired, and also the fact you saw Luque kind of reverse position. He had a kind of a close chokehold there in the 3rd round. He did land some damage as well when it was briefly on the feet. And I think he gave Vicente there the 3rd round. But Graves definitely impressed me. We didn't really see a lot of grappling skills on his 2 fights in the show in terms of really pressing for the takedown. And for Vicente, a guy who, went 1-1 as well, but arguably could be 2-0 if you thought he won that final fight there against Hassan, definitely was a guy that a lot of people thought definitely probably would have the better stand-up than Michael Graves, but Michael Graves kind of took that out of the equation there with the takedowns, and I think kind of surprised Vicente. I don't think he was expecting that, many takedown attempts against him. And I think Graves did a great job of taking him out of his game, and he got the W.
Yeah, Graves, I was kind of surprised too, like you said. At first, I didn't give him enough credit. I was kind of like, oh man, he got by, but it was pretty tough to get him down that much and control that fight the way he did for those first 2 rounds at least. And he walks away with a good win there. I'd like to see more from him.
And I like really to see more from both guys. I think his 2 fights in the show were probably the 2 best fights maybe all season in Vicente. So I hope he can come back strong and kind of, he now knows what he needs to work on. We didn't really see him get tested too much in takedown defense, but now he kind of knows. And again, I think in the 3rd round, he showed that he has a lot of skills. He maybe had the wrong game plan going in.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. If they ran it back, I don't know if it'd go the same.
The big fight there for the Ultimate Fighter guys, Kamaru Usman for the Black Zillions against Hayder Hassan for American Top Team. The winner of this got the trophy and got their team $300,000. This was kind of like the big playoff, as American Top Team won the regular season and the $200,000. This was kind of going to either be icing on the cake for American Top Team or a chance for the Black Zillions to kind of enact a little revenge, as they look like they kind of had the season in the bag there. Until they lost the last 3 fights to allow the American Top Team to come from behind and win the regular season, so to speak, of this season's tournament format for the Ultimate Fighter 21. And Kamaru Usman, a guy, really strong wrestler, against kind of a more brawling and sprawling type there, and Hayder Hassan. And I just had a feeling Usman would be able to get this thing to the ground and control, and not play into Hassan's game of a brawl. And that's exactly what he did, is he was able to take this thing down, officially 6 of 8 on takedowns in a fight that lasted into the 2nd round, officially up until the 119 marker, where Usman was able to work in a triangle choke, and great job transitioning on this triangle choke. You know, he was kind of on top and mount with it. You hear Brian Stand go, you know, he needs to get more over to the right, kind of make himself perpendicular. He's up against the cage. I don't know if he'll be able to pull it off. And he kind of just slowly but surely worked and pushed himself and kind of got off the cage a little bit and finally kind of got over to the right. And Hassan didn't do really much to get out from that position and had to tap there. And very impressive victory for Usman and getting his team the 300 grand.
Yeah, this is a good win for him. It's kind of exactly as expected. He controlled it, but what I'm happy for is he didn't just sit on it. You know, he got the finish, and he got that arm triangle very good. It's a good win for him. I think he has potential because his wrestling's so strong. He can control a lot of fighters.
I think that's what a lot of people were looking for. Not could he take him down. I think that was going to be apparent. But on the show, not the most exciting guy. The fact, like you said, he goes out there against Hassan, who, you know, had great performances on the show, was able to take him down 6 times and get the finish. That's definitely a big deal.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for there. If he just wanted a decision, I would just, all right. But if you go in there and you finish it, makes a lot more.
The main event of the evening, the juggernaut Jake Ellenberger against the Wonder Boy Stephen Thompson at 170 pounds. And officially looking at this, Billy, you know Jake Ellenberger, a really good wrestler, only attempted 1 takedown. And that, to me, is the key to the fight. In fact, Stephen Thompson is credited with 3 takedown attempts. So right there, you already know it's probably not good for Jake Ellenberger. If you haven't watched the fight on your DVR yet, or you didn't watch it live, Jake Ellenberger needed to push the pace, get in close, cut the reach down, and take this thing to the ground. He did not do that. In fact, he tried to kind of stand mostly, besides a few brief scrambles where, you know, both kind of initiated the clinch there. It was not going to be your night, and it proved that way as Ellenberger was able to get hit with not 1 but 2 spinning back kicks. The first one did a lot of damage, but the second one, I think, was just much like the fight we'll get to at 189, kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, as it looked like his foot just hit it. But you add in with the previous spinning back kick and the punches that followed up that spinning back kick, was too much for the juggernaut Jake Ellenberger to handle, and Stephen Thompson walks away with the first round knockout victory at the 429 marker.
Yeah, Ellenberger, he avoided the only thing he needed to do to win this fight, and he's like, I'm just going to stand with him. I don't really understand it. Thompson's striking is so good. Like, I'm so excited for this kid in the future. I mean, he might be like 30, so I shouldn't say kid. He's out there, but he's striking so good. I mean, like you said, the first kick did all the real damage, that spinning kick, but the second one was just enough to do it. And it looked a lot brutaler the way it wobbled back. But that first one was nasty. It landed clean.
Yeah, he is definitely, and the reason this is a big victory is because, 1, Thompson, you know, obviously being the karate striker, people thought, oh, can he beat a wrestler in a good one like Ellenberger? Not only did he beat him, he knocked him out in the first round. That's very impressive. You got to look at that. And 2, you know, he was coming off an injury, and it had been a while since we had seen Stephen Thompson fight. He was supposed to fight all the way back in February against Brandon Thatch. That fight never materialized. So I know for Thompson, this had to feel really good to finally get back in the cage, you know, get the victory, and he took relatively little damage. And like I said, with the layoff, I got to believe he wants to get back in there as soon as possible. And there's a few guys that you and I have kind of talked about previewing and getting ready for the show here, Billy. Gunnar Nelson being one of those guys, I think would be a fantastic matchup here if they can book that sometime before the end of the year.
I want to see that fight so bad. That's the perfect matchup. It could honestly headline a Fox card, and I'd be happy. Maybe not. Maybe that's a little crazy, but just the matchup, I want to watch that fight.
Well, definitely a Fox Sports 1. I mean, if they were, obviously, Thompson headlined this one, and he was going to headline the card there on Valentine's Day with Brandon Thatch. Gunnar Nelson's already headlined a card.
Yeah. And after both these huge wins, I mean, Gunnar has a huge win. We'll talk about that. This is a highlight reel finish for Thompson. He already had a lot of hype around him anyway.
Now, is the card in Dublin in October, is that a FS1 card or a Fight Pass card?
I'm not going to lie. I don't know.
I don't think it's a pay-per-view, though.
No.
Well, he trains in Ireland, that being Gunnar Nelson. Maybe you can set up Nelson versus Thompson there for the Dublin card.
Yeah, I think Nelson would probably be on that card either way. Honestly, if it's not a pay-per-view or something, he'll probably end up headlining it.
And yeah, I'm almost certain it's not a pay-per-view, but I think that's October 24th. You kind of look at the timing, that's about 3 months from now.
Maybe a little too soon. But I mean, they both didn't take much damage, so.
Right, that's what I mean. They're should be ready to go. All right, that is the Ultimate Fighter 21. Just so people know, Billy, you did an excellent job. Billy went 6-0 in his picks for the Ultimate Fighter.
That makes up my 189 card.
I only got 3 fights right, as I got Blanco, Watterson, and Usman.
I think I went 1-6 on 89 though. So
yeah, we only each got one win apiece on 189. So not great for that, but it was a great night of fights as we transition into UFC 89. Before we get to it, we don't have the exact numbers, but it looks as though this will be the first card in quite a number of years to feature over 1 million pay-per-view buys. And I kind of just want to talk about that for a minute. Obviously, a lot has to do with Conor McGregor. I think so. But I think moving forward, because of the performances of some of the other guys on this card, mainly looking at a guy like Robbie Lawler, I think that this card can really help the UFC moving forward and selling more pay-per-views, even if it isn't just Conor McGregor. I really think Robbie Lawler proved that he can be a draw. If people were maybe down on him for 171 or 181 for whatever reason, I think his performance, which we'll get to in just a minute, I think proved that he can be a legit main event draw, and I think people want to tune in to see that dude fight.
Yeah, I mean, if you're new to the sport and you watch this card because McGregor got you in, or a lot of people are watching new for McGregor, every single fight on this main card delivered and some. Like, every fight was great. You got to see a little bit of everything. Wars, I think a submission I think Nelson finished by submission, knockouts all over the place. There's nothing you can add. I think this was, honestly, I'm going to say it, the best main card of all time.
It's definitely pretty good. Definitely probably will be a lot of people's pick for fight card of the year. I'm still up in the air about it. We still got some cards, but I just thought that New Orleans card, just top to bottom, was fantastic with like 10 out of 12 knockouts. But yeah, this one's definitely up there when you add in the level of the fighters that competed there at UFC 189. And it all started off with the fight at bantamweight as Thomas Almeida took on Brad Pickett, who's moving back up to bantamweight. And early on, very even first round, but it seemed like Pickett was kind of getting the better of the exchanges there in the first round. And you and I were sitting there watching, like, man, this is the Brad Pickett we remember. Not the guy who just couldn't seem to get into a rhythm at 125. He seemed to go right back and fall right back to how we remember Brad One Punch Pickett moving up to 135. And that was kind of continuing early on into the second round. And all of a sudden, Thomas Almeida decides to throw a flying knee, knocks out Brad Pickett cold just 29 seconds into the second round for kind of a come from behind victory there. Because if you look at his face, a lot more messed up than Brad Pickett. And people are talking about, hype, and that was a big theme of the card. The hype is real for Thomas Almeida. This kid's now 19-0, 3-0 in the UFC, another spectacular knockout victory. This time against the best guy he's ever fought in Brad Pickett. He's moving up very quickly up the rankings here, and I'd like to see him take on a top 10 opponent here for his next fight. He kind of reminds me a little bit of how, Renan Barão moved up the rankings, a little bit just a few years ago. So he's a force to be reckoned with, I think, in this bantamweight division.
Oh, for sure. I think I was watching Kenny Florian saying you gotta hit this dude to wake him up. Well, something happened because he was getting rocked all over the place, and I was like, man, but that knee was flush, and when he turned it on, he turned it on. So this dude's real, and I'm going to watch every fight I see his name. I'll make sure to pay attention to. That's one of the good things about this card. I think a lot of people will.
The next fight of the evening was in the welterweight division as Gunnar Nelson took on Brandon Thatch, two of the up-and-coming guys in this division. One thing we mentioned, Billy, was the height and reach that Brandon Thatch would have over Gunnar Nelson. Would Gunnar Nelson have a hard time being able to get in the inside? And if he did and they clinched, how would he deal with the physical strength of Brandon Thatch? Those were kind of the questions we had. And it's one of the reasons that led me to pick Brandon Thatch. And Gunnar Nelson not only was able to get in the inside, he was able to do it in a fantastic fashion. I just think his movement was something maybe I didn't give as much credit to, as he was able to move in and out pretty easily. In fact, even though this thing only went about half a round, he outstruck Brandon Thatch 20-8. And I think that movement kind of maybe took Thatch by surprise. He was able to move in with a nice 1-2 combination that dropped Brandon Thatch. And in a scramble, in a ground, we know all how good Gunnar Nelson is, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion there. He was able to scramble quickly for the back and sink in a rear naked choke and get the tap at 254, and a very impressive bounce back win for Gunnar Nelson.
Man, I was so wrong about this fight. I thought Thatch would walk in and destroy him on the feet if that's where it stood. And Nelson looked really good. I don't think I just gave Gunnar enough credit in general. I think I was kind of that Rick Story fight. I don't know what it was, but I didn't. And that combination landed flush. And then once he goes to the ground, that's Gunnar Nelson. That's what he's going to do. And he finished. And I couldn't have been more wrong in this fight. A little disappointed in Thatch, but it was a great card for Gunny.
I think for Thatch, yeah, definitely disappointing. But the good news is he was able to fight at least twice this year. Probably will get a third. He's a guy that had a lot of injury problems. He was out pretty much all of 2014. So the fact he was able to come back here in 2015, I think is a good sign. But two, you also got to factor in, he's fighting two really good guys. One guy he fought on about a week's notice in Ben Henderson, and then he changes opponents here to Gunnar Nelson. He was originally preparing for, I believe, oh boy, I forget. Somebody pulled out Thatch's fight, right? And then that's when they switched him to Nelson, and then John Howard fought Cathal Pendred. So, I mean, there was some changing around too. So I give Brandon Thatch a little bit of a pass because he didn't have to take the opponent change, but whoever he was preparing for was not obviously the caliber of Gunnar Nelson.
Yeah, I agree. Also, since you bring it up, my man Cathal got robbed. There's no telling me that the GOAT lost that fight. It's just not possible.
I don't know if he got robbed. I mean, he's got a couple of gift decisions out of those, the 4-0s March before this one. So I think he was maybe due for being on the wrong side of the decision.
No, I'm 100% joking. I think he lost that fight anyway, but...
Do you think this fight makes him realize he should probably move up to 185? It just doesn't seem like he's looked any good at 170. I just think that he should at least give it a go at 185 because he doesn't seem like the same guy we saw in The Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah, I agree there, but he's gonna dominate wherever he goes. This is the first little stumble in his 4-1 run. It's not bad.
No, I'm not saying he has to, but I'm saying that's something he should start to take a look at.
No, I agree 100%. Yeah, it wouldn't be bad. He sucks a lot of weight down.
The next fight of the evening was in the featherweight division as Jeremy Stephens took on Dennis Bermudez, and I think up until the next fight was probably going to be fight of the night and probably could have been a candidate for fight of the year, as these two guys, not known for being boring, did not disappoint here at UFC 189, as Bermudez actually was able to get the better of the two striking, outstriking Stephens 66-39. But I think the big factor in this fight, Billy, was the fact that Bermudez was only able to land one takedown, and that was in the first round. And even if Bermudez was getting the better of the striking, the longer it stayed on the feet, that's a longer chance for Jeremy Stephens to do something crazy and get a knockout, which is what he's known to do. And first of all, you got to credit him for stopping the takedown. Two, credit him for somehow hanging around. He took some bombs from Dennis Bermudez in this fight. And three, being able to land that knee in close quarters like that to get the knockout in the third round at the 32-second marker. Just very impressive victory by Jeremy Stephens. I feel bad for Bermudez. It looked like he was winning this fight, but that's one thing. Jeremy Stephens is a guy that can knock you out from a lot of different positions. And if you keep it standing, that's kind of the power that you're messing with. Just this time it was a knee.
Yeah, there's another fight I got to eat my words on, because I'm sitting here talking about this will probably be one of the last fights we see of Jeremy Stephens, and hasn't been looking good. He goes out there and takes punishment, but he finishes up and lands his own, and that knee was beautiful. It was like a fadeaway knee how he landed that, and I'm kind of lost for words. It was so good.
Yeah, and it definitely puts him not right back into title contention, but it keeps him from dropping too far out of the rankings, or like you said, possibly dropping out of the UFC. That would have been his third consecutive loss had he not got the win there at UFC 189. So that kind of keeps him even keel with some of the other guys. And with the win, maybe that we see a possible maybe rematch with Cub Swanson, I think would be maybe a nice fight, or maybe you get a Chad Mendez now, or maybe a Ricardo Lamas. There's definitely some good fights out there for him. And I think Bermudez, even though this is his second loss in a row, he's a guy that's been exciting in all of his fights in the UFC. He could probably end up losing 5 in a row before the UFC cuts him. I mean, he brings that level of excitement to every fight. Those are guys the UFC gives a little longer leash to.
Yeah, 100%. I'd love to see Stephens fight one of those like Mendez Lamas guys, but I do think they're going to run this one back just because of the weight issue. You do have to bring that up. He did miss weight in this and some other things, but it was a great fight. This was the point of the night where I'm like, it literally can't get better than this. After everything we've seen, there's no way these two co-main and main can live up to the hype. And they did.
Well, let's get to that co-main event as Robbie Lawler took on Rory McDonald for the welterweight title, a rematch between the two. And looking at this fight, Rory McDonald actually did outstrike Robbie Lawler 87-76. And not only that, was the more active fighter, as he threw 223 strikes to just 163 by Robbie Lawler. And Rory McDonald tried a couple of, I would say, ill-advised takedown attempts, as he was 0 for 4 in that category. Didn't press the issue much, but did try to switch up a little bit. Like I said, maybe ill-advised. The first round, very slow between both gentlemen. McDonald is credited with outstriking by just 2, 11-9, but the output in that round, to me, gave McDonald that round, as he threw 41 strikes to just 17 for Robbie Lawler. The second round, very close, 22-20 in favor of McDonald. I think I probably would have gave Robbie that round. In the third round, Rory McDonald, that's when he landed a very nice kick started to accumulate, and he started to kind of get into a rhythm there. Would have gave him that third round as well. The fourth round was very close. You had Robbie Lawler trying to come back from that big kick he suffered in the third round. McDonald came out the beginning of that round. I believe he landed another one of those head kicks there, Billy, and started to look like maybe it was going to be the beginning of the end. And then I think after the cobwebs have kind of settled a little bit, Robbie Lawler seemed to kind of get his second wind in the middle of that round. And I think at that point, that was the changing point of this fight, as Robbie Lawler, to me, really took control of that round, ended the fourth round very strong, and came out strong in the fifth, finished it at the 1-minute marker with the last final strike that Rory McDonald's head could absorb, as just a straight left down the middle sent Rory McDonald crumbling to the canvas, with the referee having to step in. And they say McDonald suffered a broken foot in this fight. At what point that happened, I don't know. But after the first 2 rounds, Billy, when it became more of a brawl and less of Rory McDonald sticking and moving, I kind of told you, even if Robbie's taking shots and he's getting outstrike, I just feel like he can come back. I just kept on thinking about that Malvin Manhoef fight he had back in a Strikeforce, where he's just getting tore up by Malvin Manhoef. He could barely walk, and somehow he uncorks a left and knocks out Manhoef. I just kind of had a feeling that was happening. That's the vibe I was getting from this fight, and that's kind of what ended up happening. He was arguably down 3 rounds to 1, heading into the fifth, depending on how you scored it. And, he was able to get the job done. I think this was a great championship effort by Robbie Lawler, and I think proved, if there was any doubt, he's the number 170 in the world.
Yeah, you can't ask for more when it comes to championship fights. And I think it was officially on the judges' scorecards. They had Rory up 3-1, so he did what he had to do. And like you said, it starts off kind of slow in one. In the third, Rory has him hurt pretty bad, and that's when I was like, all right, this is the end. Rory pulls away, but somehow Robbie he keeps turning up, and he finds a way to come back in and he land those shots. I mean, Rory's face was shattered, his nose was destroyed. It was bad all around. Like, that dude hits hard, and it wasn't like just one big shot. He landed a bunch of them, but just both these fighters, it was amazing. It was such a war and how deep they had to dig. Rory had broken foot, shattered nose, keeps going. Robbie's rocked, barely walking, keeps coming at him and gets the finish in the fifth. I mean, you can't get a better fight for a championship belt.
I was telling to you, not only with the blood, but obviously the impact his nose was taking, it didn't even look like Rory had a nose. I was like, man, he looks like a zombie or something. Like, it looks like his nose got cut off. Like, his nose was demolished. He obviously not only suffered a broken and looked like collapsed nose if you see the post-fight pictures, but I believe he also suffered a mild concussion on top of, like I said, the broken foot.
Yeah, you can't watch this fight and not become a fan of either of these guys, even Rory in a loss. I think people said it too, but Roy's the clear second in that division, I feel. But, I mean, you can't watch that fight and not just be a fan of either of those guys.
Well, hopefully they can set up Mr. Tyron Woodley against Johnny Hendricks here pretty soon to get the number 1 contender. I keep on harping on this New Year's Eve thing, but if they're not going to throw Conor and Aldo then, or have Ronda fight then, I believe Robbie Lawler is a pretty strong candidate. He's going to have to wait here, like I said, for Woodley and Hendricks. They can get that fight here happening. He'll either have Hendricks Lawler 3, or we'll see Woodley against Lawler come later this year.
Yeah, and also don't forget about Condit on that comeback, man. He looked great. He's another one that could pop up.
Yeah, he definitely. I think he factors in there, but I think with Woodley's win over him. Yeah. Obviously a lot of people, they said Hendricks wasn't going to get it after beating Matt Brown in kind of a ho-hum performance. So what I would like to see is Woodley against Hendricks for the number 1 contender. And then Matt Brown, kind of soared back up in the rankings with his win here over Tim Means. I like to see Brown versus Condit.
Yeah. I'm a little biased. I'd almost rather see Condit get another shot at Woodley. I really want to see that fight again. I feel like if Condit would have survived later, he would have pulled away with that fight. But it probably is deserved that way, where Woodley and Hendricks, and then Condit could take on Brown, which who doesn't want to watch that fight? Any Matt Brown fight, let alone Condit. That's just a great fight.
Right, and also the Woodley-Hendricks thing kind of has some build-up years in the making, because these two fought in the NCAA tournaments in wrestling, Missouri versus Oklahoma State. So you kind of have that angle to it as well, and I just think that's a good one to book either for a co-main event of a pay-per-view or headlining, a FS1 card.
Yeah, that definitely deserves the number 1 contender shot.
Well, let's get to that main event. As you said when we opened up the show, Billy, hype is real. As the notorious one, Conor McGregor took on Chad Monday Mendez for the interim featherweight championship. And even though Conor got taken down, which was proven he can get taken down, not only did he get held there, he was able to survive the onslaught of Chad Mendez to get a second-round knockout victory just before the bell expired in round number 2, officially at 4:57. And I think Conor, I don't know if it was his knee was bothering him, it was conditioning, or if he just knew if he could wait out Mendez, he would get his chance on the feet. And that's why, when you see the fight go to the ground, he didn't explode as much and try to get out of that position, especially in the second round. And I kind of hated, I saw it, something on Twitter, some guy put, yeah, Mendez was able to take him down, but he wasn't able to hold him there. And that's completely false. I don't know if you watched that second round, but Mendez held him there for about 4 minutes. That's holding someone down. That's not taking someone down and not doing anything with it. You want to see Conor's face from the elbows he took? Mendez held him down and did damage. There's no debate about that. You cannot say he didn't do anything with those 4 takedowns. That is false. But Conor did enough to not take too much damage and conserve his energy enough that when it did get to the feet, he was able to outclass Chad Mendes, who I don't know if it was all taking the fight on 11-day notice or if it was all body shots from McGregor. I think it was kind of a combination of the two, but whatever it was, he couldn't last much longer. And Conor capitalized on the opportunity that was presented to him kind of in that last 45 seconds of the second round and got the finish. And some people are upset about the stoppage, but to me, it just didn't look like Mendes had much left in the tank. And I think the referee in that case was Herb Dean, made the right move and stopped this thing.
No, it was 100% the right call. No bias here, but I thought McGregor took this fight from the start. I mean, he tore his body up. Don't get me wrong, Mendes put him on his back and he did a lot of damage. But the reason I think Conor reserves so much energy is he's never like, I don't want to say like flustered or spazzing to get out. He's so calm the whole time. He's just down there talking. He's calm, and then when he gets to his feet, he walks you down. He lands the shot he needs to land. And I mean, if it's on the feet like stand up battle, there's no one I'm gonna pick against Conor. And the only person I think that could even pose a threat to him now is Edgar, and that's kind of because Mendes, when he's on top of you, he kind of is comfortable in that guard, landing those shots. Edgar's more active all over and like passing and stuff like that. He puts a higher pace on you. His all-around MMA wrestling, I think, is maybe a little better, but Mendes is the best pure wrestler in that division probably, and McGregor handled it really well. He stayed calm, and even if Chad didn't go to that guillotine where Conor got to the feet at the end of that round, I think it was inevitable where he was going to end up knocking him out.
Like I said, yeah, he was definitely, I think, buying his time to get back on the feet. I think that's why like I said, you didn't see the explosion. Because in the second round, I'm sitting there, I'm watching it with you, and I'm like, he's not really doing much. You know, he's letting Mendes basically, you know, elbow him in the face for 4 minutes. You know, he wasn't doing much to explode. He wasn't throwing up legs for submission. You didn't see a scramble. And maybe I should have realized that, oh, maybe he's kind of playing possum a little bit. But typically, you don't play possum with a guy as good as Chad Mendes on top of you.
Yeah, but I mean,
so he maybe kind of played me a little bit, maybe played Mendes a little bit. And like I said, when it was on the feet, he seized the opportunity and got the job done.
Yeah, when it comes down the feet, I just don't. I don't know how this dude does it. Like he just walks at this pace and he lands these shots at will, and it's so amazing. His accuracy with the spinning kicks and everything. But yeah, when he was on the bottom, he was talking the whole time, running his mouth, same old Conor, nice and calm. So I would favor him in the Aldo fight. I hate to say this, but now he doesn't have to worry about that takedown at all. There's nothing in that case. Like, I can't wait for that fight.
Well, I think people are also missing the point that Mendes will fight McGregor again.
No, yeah.
You know, they're going to run it back when both guys don't have 11 days to know who their opponent is.
Yeah, because a lot of people give Mendes the whole thing. I get it. It's tough. You take a fight on that notice, much respect to him. It's hard, but it was a huge change for McGregor, too. He went polar opposite in styles.
No, it really is, but to think those two will never fight again and Mendes won't get his chance to maybe kind of finish what he started, so to speak, with those takedowns, I think you're absolutely wrong. It's going to happen at some point, especially if Conor does beat Aldo. You know, that helps Mendes get back, you know, into that picture for the title. But if Aldo ends up winning, you know, we're really going to see Mendes Aldo 3 with Aldo being up 2-0. Less likely. All right. As good as 189 was, and you know, we're talking about 1 million pay-per-view buys, and you know, it's the most freshest thing in our memory. Most people point to UFC 100 or even UFC 92 as being some of the, you know, better pay-per-view main cards, you know, of all time. I think this one, and even people think are forgetting how good UFC 187 was just 2 months ago. That was a great card as well. They had, I believe, every fight almost a knockout on the main card or finish. So just kind of looking at some of the ones we've had past, I think the two I mentioned, I think a lot of people do hold, you know, highly regarded, but I think this one's right up there in terms of, you know, best pay-per-view cards. And you know, we haven't got the official numbers yet, but it's looking like it's going to be the first $1 million card in a very long time. or million, not $1 million card. I'm sorry,
$1
million buys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't see how it couldn't. It seems so huge if you even looked at like social media stuff like that. I know the fights don't affect it before if you buy it before. I mean, but everything about it worked out well in my eyes. Even we didn't really talk too much about all the new graphics and everything, but I really liked that. I liked a lot of those designs. The walkouts, I mean, that was something new for the UFC, but I think that's only reserved for like this type of card once in a really long time.
And I think it's also reserved for Vegas.
Yeah.
I don't see them doing sung out intros in any other place but the fight capital of the world.
I think the next time we see it will be UFC 200.
Yeah, most likely. And before we get to San Diego here, let's talk about Reebok. You talked about the graphics a little bit. You know, they look good. They look clean. You know, it was kind of a fresh look. It's nice to kind of change things up every once in a while. The logo thing, if you haven't known, the UFC changed their logo. If you didn't notice this, because it's barely noticeable, all they did was kind of change the C there. It's more straight, I guess. It kind of always looked like kind of like a wrench sort of deal. But now it's more straight. Other than that, the U and the F look completely the same. And in fact, the way the C is and the way it looks with the other letters, it kind of almost makes you think, how come that wasn't the C from the start? Because it fits more with the other two letters, the U and the F, than the original C did. So it's kind of interesting. It took them, what, like 15 years to figure that out?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I didn't even pay too much attention to the logo. I was more impressed with like the graphics. I like the round stuff like that and the timer. I like that. So it gives it a cleaner, more simple look.
And then did you like the projection there, kind of leading up to the two big fights intro there in the cage?
Yeah, at first I didn't know. On the TV, I feel like it'd be way cooler. But I mean, it definitely looked cool. It's something to add. And I mean, if you're live and I mean, some people aren't even going to be able to see it the way the seats are, but if you have a good angle, that'd be so cool to see live.
And then let's talk about the Reebok uniforms here for a second. First time with Reebok. The jerseys looked fine. You know, the walkout zip up thing that they wearing fine. The only thing I didn't like was the fact that it just seemed like every fighter either had white shorts or black shorts. That just seemed kind of boring to me. And after watching, you know, the prelims, then getting to the main card, that kind of bored me a little bit. And not only were they just black and white, Billy, they were the same exact style, black with a white stripe coming in and white with the black stripe coming. If it could have been a little different, even if it was the same color, I don't know. Maybe that's a weird thing and that's nitpicking because at the end of the day, who cares what color shorts they're wearing or who cares what's on their shorts or what company makes the shorts. But I don't know. That just kind of was, and hopefully, again, as we said, this was their first run. This will be their first month doing it, but hopefully they get to kind of throw some different colors in there.
Yeah, I kind of going into it, I'm like, man, this Reebok deal, it looks so dumb. Everything about it I didn't like, but when the fights actually happened, I'm not going to lie, I barely even paid attention or thought about it that much. There wasn't.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, there's not many times I was even like, oh man, I wish, I just didn't even think about it. It didn't even really be that much of a difference in my head.
All right, let's get to UFC Fight Night San Diego, officially UFC Fight Night 71. 6 fights will be shown on the main card. The first fight of the evening is in the welterweight division as Alan Joe Boy will take on Matt Dwyer. Looking at Joe Boy, he was actually supposed to fight in his home state of Louisiana just about a month ago. Had to pull out of that one. Gets rebooked here for Fight Night 71. So far, Joe Boy 2-1 in the UFC. His last fight, a knockout victory over Richard Walsh at UFC 184, and 8 of his 11 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Dwyer, 8-2 in his career, all 8 victories by knockout. So far, 1-1 in the UFC as he had a knockout victory over William Marcuccio, the Superman Punch knockout. If you don't remember that one, in the first round at the Mere Bigfoot card, UFC Fight Night 61. Don't know a lot about Dwyer, the Canadian. Obviously, a lot of knockout power. If you kind of missed that fight there against Marcuccio, I do remember that knockout. I think they ended up replaying that one on the main card. Pretty impressive. Going up as another guy who's a tremendous striker in Joe Boy. I think we're going to see some fireworks here, and this is a perfect fight to kick off this card in San Diego.
Yeah, I really like Jabouin. I've been pretty interested watching his fights, and then this Dwyer, like you said, 100% knockout when he wins. So this can't go wrong.
And also, according to Sheerdog, and they also show his height here, he's 6'4", fighting at 170, Mr. Dwyer.
Wow.
That's a big dude.
Yeah, I didn't even know that. That's kind of crazy.
In fact, I don't know if anyone's 6'4" in this division or has been 6'4".
I feel like that's wrong.
Sheerdog is 6'4". If UFC for some reason only has their height listed in inches, he's listed at 76 inches, which is 4 inches taller than Joe Boy, who is 6 foot. So yeah, this is a big dude.
That's interesting, but yeah, that's going to be a great fight to watch. Look out for that one.
The next fight of the evening will come in the lightweight division as Motown phenom Kevin Lee will take on James Muntasiri. And if you haven't listened already, it's going to be on our audio version as well, but it's already up here on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. I got a chance to talk with Kevin Lee about this fight right here at UFC Fight Night 71 in San Diego against James Muntasiri. So check out that interview with the Motown phenom right here on our YouTube channel. And he had a lot of interesting things to say. I really enjoyed it, and hope to have him on again soon. But the biggest thing I noticed, and he's not a super tall guy here in the lightweight division, 5'9". You know, I was surprised to hear that he started this camp walking around at 187 pounds, he told me. When I talked to him about a month ago, he was down, he said, about 10 pounds, 177, 178, and he said he should get his weight on track. So this is a dude that's going to be really big, very strong for this weight class. And, you know, you talk about, oh, well, his conditioning and whatnot. His conditioning looked fine fighting in Colorado in his most recent victory. So I think even with the big weight cut, he should be fine. And I think he proved a lot in that fight. I think a lot of people think of him just as kind of a striker. He showed a lot of great grappling skills in that fight there against Prazeres, coming back in Valentine's Day. Now 3-1 in the UFC. His only loss was his debut to Al Iaquinta. He has rattled off 3 straight. And he's taking on James Muntasiri, who again, kind of reminds me of, Alan Joe Boy. I mean, they both train together there in LA. Very similar, very exciting guy, very exciting striker. Muntasiri, 8-2 in his career, 1-1 in the UFC. He was able to win against Cody Pfister via rear naked choke, also on Valentine's Day. 3 of his 8 career victories are by knockout, and I think Kevin Lee can obviously stand with Muntasiri, but I think doing that kind of plays into his hand. I think that's where Muntasiri would like to keep this fight. And I think for Kevin Lee, you got to keep Muntasiri guessing. If you can get this thing up against the cage, use your strength, get on top, I think he can get a victory. But I think if it stays standing, it's more of an even matchup. And I think, you play more into the hands of Muntasiri.
Yeah, I think this fight will. I think he'll stay standing, but the thing is, Kevin Lee just needs to mix in his wrestling more, even if he doesn't want to keep the fight there, just to keep him guessing, and it'll give him that little upper hand edge, and I think he'll be able to get a slight advantage if he does that, if he can put him on his back a few times.
The next fight of the evening will be in the bantamweight division, as Scott Jorgensen will take on Manny Gambarian. Looking at Scott Jorgensen, he is moving back up to the bantamweight division after a brief run at flyweight, which, much like Brad Pickett, we talked about UFC 189, did not really go his way, as since dropping down, he only went 1-3 at 125 pounds and got finished in 2 of those fights. His only win at 125 pounds was against Danny Martinez at UFC Fight Night 42. His last fight was a loss to Wilson Reese back in October of last year. So it's been a while since we've seen Scott Jorgensen. I think he was trying to reassess, what division he wanted to fight on. And the division he's had the most success in his career was at 135 pounds. So he's moving back up, taking on Manny Gambarian, who kind of had that run there in the WEC, was able to fight Jose Aldo for the title. He has also dropped down another 10 pounds, and since coming back to the UFC after his initial run at 155 pounds, he is 3-3 with a no contest. And I believe his only win at 135 was a victory over Cody Gibson. That was his last fight back at UFC 178. So both guys are trying to kind of reassert themselves here in the bantamweight division, kind of one last run for each of these guys.
Yeah, I feel the same as far as like both of these guys have had their run, I think, and I think Jorgensen will have better success moving back up because he definitely struggled down there, and it doesn't help that he was finished that many times. But I mean, it's weird for them. I don't know. I think Scott Jorgensen out-edged this fight a little bit, only because I think he'll be a lot healthier back up.
The interesting thing will be the wrestling. Obviously, Scott Jorgensen, always kind of known, the former, Pac-10 champion there at Boise State. Then you have the great judo game of Manny Gambirian. I wonder if those two kind of negate each other and to stay standing. If it does, I would say Jorgensen's probably the better boxer, but Gambirian moving down, I would say has the more power. But how long can that power last? I mean, against Gibson, he only went late into the second round. Obviously, with Jorgensen moving back up, he should have no problem with his conditioning. The weight cut should be fine for him. But, if this thing goes into the third and it's a brawl, will Manny's conditioning hold up? Again, only second fight at 35, and it's been, over 8 months since he last fought. So I think that's something you also got to look at as an X factor.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about Jorgensen's chin also. He's taking some big shots. But, I mean, we'll see how it plays out.
The next fight of the evening will be in the women's bantamweight division as Holly Holm will take on Marion Reneau. Looking at Holm, just 1-0 in the UFC, still undefeated in her career at 8-0, 6 of 8 victories by knockout. Her debut was against Raquel Pennington at UFC 184, which she won by split decision. Looking at Marion Reneau, kind of a veteran of the sport in terms of age, 38 years old, but only has 7 professional fights. 3 of the 6 victories are by knockout. She is so far 2-0 in the UFC and had a huge upset victory in her last fight at UFC Fight Night 61 as she submitted Jessica Andrade in the first round. And I think that surprised a lot of people, Billy. Jessica Andrade was a girl that was kind of ready to shoot up the rankings, and Reneau was able to go in there, not only beat her, but submit her in the first round, and obviously showed that she has some great grappling skills, and that is something that Holly Holm is not known for, grappling. If this thing can get to the ground, I think Reneau can easily submit Holly Holm, but if it stays standing, Holly Holm may add another knockout to her resume.
Yeah, this is sort of just your classic striker versus grappler here. If Reneau can take her grappling, get her on her back, I think she dominates this fight. If Holm can negate that and just keep in her striking range, she wins this fight. So it'll be interesting to see.
And also I'm interested just how Holly Holm performs. Could she get a knockout? Yes, absolutely. But I want to see the output. I want to see kind of like the fear that she's put and that nastiness we kind of saw in Legacy. We didn't really see that against Raquel Pennington. We saw a more kind of conservative. We didn't really see her go for the kill, kind of lethargic almost in that fight against 184. And I'd like to see her not only up the intensity, but up the output. It's not, to me, it's not as important that she gets the win here as that she looks impressive. She's trying to be built up as the girl that can beat Ronda Rousey. And that fight at 184 did not make me think that's anywhere close to ever happening. And if the UFC wants that fight to be realized and people taking Holly Holm seriously, I think she needs to make a statement here at Fight Night 71.
Yeah, that division's so weird because Ronda's cleared out so many contenders. So if you do want the shot, you can't just slowly get a few wins. You basically got to do something, get your name recognized, like a really good finish. And I wasn't that impressed in her first fight. Maybe we'll see more of it here because they need someone to build up now against Ronda. She's running out of people.
The co-main events of the evening will be at 155 pounds. As former Strikeforce lightweight champion will take on former Ultimate Fighter winner Tony Ferguson, and that's Josh Thompson, the former Strikeforce champion. Thompson coming into this fight on a 2-fight losing streak to Bobby Green and Ben Henderson. So far in the return to the UFC, had a couple fights early on in his career, just 1-2. The only victory over Nate Diaz, that was about 2 years ago at Fox 7. Both those losses, I will note, were split decisions. Looking at Tony Ferguson, this guy has been on a roll. Since losing to Michael Johnson in May of 2012, he has rattled off 5 victories, with 4 of them being finishes, most recently submitting Gleason Tebow in the first round at UFC 184, and is knocking on the door of title contention here. And if he can take out a guy the caliber of Josh Thompson, that's a very big deal. You can make a case that that's the best guy that he has fought in his career, that being Tony Ferguson. If he can beat him, that's a big deal. And for Josh Thompson, if you don't get this victory, I think you're just about done in terms of trying to make a title run. I mean, like I said, you already have 2 losses in a row. Again, good guys, split decisions. But when you look at this thing, you're already 36 years old. You lose another one. You don't got that much time left, first of all, to fight. And second of all, to try to run back up arguably the toughest division in the UFC. Josh Thompson has a lot riding on the line in this fight. And I wonder if that, desperation, we see the Josh Thompson remember kind of in those Gilbert Melendez fights.
Yeah, for Josh Thompson, it's exactly like you said. This is really his last chance to get, he'd still be a good fighter and he could float around a little bit, but to make like a serious title run, this is his last shot. And it's a real tough one because Tony Ferguson's a killer, man. He finds a way to finish, and he's one of my favorite fighters to watch right now. This is the fight I'm looking forward to most on this card, because I think you will see Josh Thompson knowing, like, all right, this is it. I have to go out and get this victory. And then Tony Ferguson, he knows he's close to clutching in on that title contention, so he's going to come out. And this fight's going to be great.
The thing to look out for is, can Josh Thompson get on the inside? Tony Ferguson, very tall and very long for this weight class. And Josh Thompson, not like super short. I mean, he's listed at 5'10", but that's obviously something that he's going to have to deal with. Can he get on the inside? And that's not just simply, Tony Ferguson with punches. He also has a lot of good kicks.
Yeah.
The X factor will also not just be strikes. Josh Thompson's a pretty solid wrestler. And we have seen Tony Ferguson have trouble with guys being on top of him. You can kind of look at the Michael Johnson fight. You can also even look at the Castillo fight, even though he got that victory. He's had trouble kind of being on his back. And he can throw up submissions and stuff, but he is still learning the best way to kind of get back up on his feet. And that's kind of the X factor, because Thompson sometimes has gone into wrestling mode and beat people that way. So that's kind of the X factor, is if Thompson decides to try to out wrestle Ferguson.
Yeah, but it's hard. Like when you watch the Castillo fight, Ferguson's really active off his back, so he can still, even on his back, he makes the fight interesting and close. That's what I like about him.
The main event of the evening, former UFC heavyweight champion Frank Mir takes on Todd Duffy. Mir kind of looked all but done, as he lost 4 consecutive fights between May of 2012 to February 2014, getting finished in 2 of those, losing to the likes of JDS, Cormier, Barnett, and Overeem. Kind of maybe his last hurrah down in Brazil earlier this year, as he took on Antonio Bigfoot Silva, was able to knock out Bigfoot Silva in the first round, showing that maybe he still has a little bit left in the tank. He takes on, even though he's 29 years old, he's one of the younger guys in the heavyweight division, in Todd Duffy, who, after a brief stint away from the sport, about 2 years, returned to fighting in 2012 after losing to Alistair Overeem in K1 on New Year's Eve of 2010. Knocked out Neil Grove in SFL 2. Came back to the UFC later that year. Has since been 2-0, taking on Philip DeFries and Anthony Hamilton, knocking out both those gentlemen in the first round. And that, to me, is 9-0, 9-2 in his career with 9 knockouts. I think this fight's not going to last very long. I think either Duffy gets a knockout, or in a scramble, Mir gets a submission. I really don't see this thing. I don't even say this thing going past the second, Billy, to be quite honest. Both these guys have incredible finishing skills. And, with Mir being towards the end of his career, if he takes a couple of those Duffy punches, man, not too many people can. So I just don't see it lasting long. It's just really who can get their hands on each other first. And, for Mir, it's kind of another fight. Even if he wins, it doesn't move him up in the rankings. But for Duffy, a lot is riding on this. If Duffy can get the win, that really shoots him up the rankings, and and he's a guy that you start to kind of look out for, if he can beat a guy like Frank Mir, albeit towards the end of his career.
Yeah, I wish Frank Mir would have retired after that big knockout. I don't know what more he has left to prove. I mean, Frank Mir's done everything, but this fight will be tough. Like you said, if Mir gets him anywhere near like a scrambler on the ground, we know how his submissions are. He's a killer with those. But Todd Duffy, he looks strong with his punching. And Mir, his chin hasn't been holding up too well. He's getting rocked pretty easy. So if he lands any of those strikes early, I'm pretty worried about Mir here.
All right, well, let's get to picks here. UFC Fight Night 71 in San Diego, the first fight of the evening at 170 pounds. Alan Joe Boy against Matt Dwyer. Dwyer definitely, obviously, that height and reach is going to be a factor. He has power of his own, but I'm going to go with the guy I think I've seen a little more here, and I'm going to go with Alan Joe Boy to win this one.
Yeah, I think Joe Boy will be able to get it done, too.
The next fight of the evening, 155 pounds, Kevin Lee against James Mutasari. I really do like both guys. I think they're both exciting young guys in this division, but I think Kevin Lee's a little more well-rounded, so I'll take our hometown guy here, Billy, the Motown Phenom, to win this one.
Yeah, I think he'll mix it up enough, and he'll be able to get a decision.
Scott Jorgensen against Manny Gambierian in the bantamweight division. It's kind of tough. I think this is a close fight. But I think the speed and I think just the overall conditioning with Jorgensen moving back up to 135 will be enough to outlast the Anvil. So give me a young gun Scott Jorgensen in this one.
I'm going to go the opposite. I haven't been too impressed with Scott Jorgensen, even though I think he'll look good moving up. I think Manny Gambierian will be able to get it done.
Women's bantamweight division, Holly Holm against Marion Renault. Renault was impressive, awesome upset victory over Jessica Andrade, but I think Holly Holm will be able to stop the takedown and probably get a finish. So I'm going to go with the preacher's daughter in this one.
I agree here. I think she'll be able to stay on her feet, and with that, she'll dominate.
Co-main event of the evening, Josh Thompson against Tony Ferguson. Ferguson just outside the top 10, so it's not officially a battle of two top 10 guys, but pretty darn close. Very close fight, but I think Ferguson's trending up, and I think Thompson's kind of trending down. So I'm going to go with El Kukui, Tony Ferguson in this one.
Ferguson's been looking too good to me. He's on a roll, and I think, like you said, it's kind of the end of Josh Thompson, at least his title run. So Ferguson wins this one, finishes him too.
Main event of the evening in the heavyweight division, Frank Mir against Todd Duffy. I think it's just Duffy's time. I think he's got his head right. The guy is just an absolute beast. I mean, this guy is a monster, and I just think maybe a couple years ago, Frank Mir probably would win, but I think right now, Todd Duffy's a guy, again, surging up, Frank Mir surging down. I'm going to go with Todd Duffy in this one.
Yeah, I'm sad to say it, but I think Mir's going to get knocked out pretty early in this. I think Todd Duffy takes this win.
Well, just before we wrap up the show, I want to mention, we're going to throw it out here. If our page can get to 400 likes, we're at 376, I think. Billy, sounds about right.
Right around there.
If we can get to 400 likes, we will start another contest giveaway. I got another Sam Alvey signed 8x10, and I also got a signed 8x10 by Jessica Evil Eye, ready to go to give away. But we got to get to 400 likes first. So if we can get to 400 likes, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast, we'll start a contest for those two signed photos to give away to some lucky fans there. And also, we will be back this week, Thursday, around noon, same time again. And we're going to break down this card we just picked, UFC Fight Night 71. We will also pick the main card fights for UFC Fight Night 72, also known as UFC Glasgow, the first fight in Scotland. So we will be back on Thursday. He is Big Shot Bill, Mr. Billy Brandt, at WBrandt21 on Twitter. I'm your host, Jim Graham, at Jim Graham on Twitter. And thanks again for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.